So Michelle has an amazing history. She was PhD in psychology from Princeton. She then became a professor here at Santa Clara, Santa Cruz universities, so was leading her way to a very successful academic life. Did a complete switch and became a singer, and became a very successful international singer, getting, I think, #1 hits or some very successful hits in South Africa, for example, I believe. And then moved into a career of sort of motivational speaking and working with people as to how to, you know, how we all fulfill our dreams, or at least find joyful, fulfilling lives. And that's largely been on and off, as well as singing, although she hasn't brought a guitar. Unfortunately, we're going to get YouTube singing today versus Michelle, I think, but she often sings for us. But while the theme has mainly been how we find ourselves and find fulfillment and joy in lives, it's always a very different tact on each talk she gives, and this is going to be a fascinating new one. So it's always very new information. And today we're going to get 10 best practices for stimulating innovative thinking in teams based on techniques for producing great music, which can help families and corporations, sports teams, associations, and it seems any group of people, including, I guess, the Humanists, perhaps, as well. So with that, looking forward to it as always. Thank you very much. Michelle Chappell.
Thank you. Hello. Hi. It's so nice to be back. I didn't think I was going to get to see you ever again, and here I am, twice in 1 year. Weird, huh? You never know what's going to happen. So, Martin, thank you for that introduction. That really helps provide the background, so I don't need to say that much about what I'm about to talk about. I wanted to ask you, though, how many of you consider yourself to be musicians or play a musical instrument? 1, 2, 3. Was that a 4? No, I don't think so. 5? 5? 6? What do you play? I'm just curious. Want to shout it out?
Violin, piano, guitar.
Oh, I didn't know that about you. And what else? Who else? What's this?
Sing.
You sing. Okay. What?
Piano, chamber music, classical.
Okay, nice, nice. Chamber, what, say it again? Piano, classical music.
Yes.
Classical music. Okay. Well, so you don't have to be a musician to understand what I'm talking about, and that's a good thing since most of you are not musicians. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use analogies from music to help explain how you can be a more effective member of a team or a group or an association. I'm going to start by saying that I've been thinking about this topic for a really long time, but for some reason it wasn't until now I decided to put it all together. So I found it interesting when I did some research. I started looking at successful people, and a lot of successful people are actually trained musicians. How many of you knew that? Some of you knew that. I didn't know that. So who is the young man on the left there?
Einstein.
Einstein played the violin. And who is the young man in the middle there? Anybody know? Woody Allen. Woody Allen plays a clarinet in a jazz band weekly. He practices every day. And then, I'm not sure if you can see who is on the right there. Can you tell? No. No? You might not be able to tell even if you did. Anybody got a guess as to who that is?
Warren Buffett.
No, but Warren Buffett plays ukulele, so that was a fair guess. That is actually Paul Allen. Do you know who Paul Allen is? Co-founder of Microsoft. Yes. He is playing lead guitar in a rock band. He's still doing that. And when he first founded Microsoft, he used to code all day, and then he'd come home after coding and he would play his guitar. And I just wanted to read a quote from why he said that helped him to be more creative at Microsoft. It pushes you to look beyond what currently exists and express yourself in a new way. So I thought, okay, if I want to take, use music as an analogy to talk about how we can be more creative, I think I'm in safe territory here. Do you think? Yeah. Okay, good. Otherwise, I was going to shut it down. Okay. All right. So then I started doing research on how the brain responds to music, and I know, Martin, you'll probably be interested in this. There's a man named Daniel Abrams at Stanford University, and he took a bunch of people one at a time, and he had them listen to a 10-minute piece of music, a symphony, and he did an MRI on them. So he's watching what parts of the brain light up. And he noticed two interesting facts. First of all, no matter who was in his study, it was the same parts of the brain that lit up. If it was you, and you, and you, and you, and me, it would be the same parts of the brain that lit up. And the other thing that was interesting is where in the brain was activated. So, of course, it makes sense that the parts of the brain that process sound, the auditory lobes, would be active, right? But it was more than that. It was also the parts of the brain that control memory, attention, and planning movement areas. Planning movement areas. What do you think that means? You listen to music and the planning movement area of your brain is activated. What is that going to make you want to do? Boogie. Right, exactly. And so he came to the conclusion, which I don't think we even needed somebody to do research on this to tell us, but because for each of us, the same parts of the brain are activated, it presents a wonderful opportunity to all put us in the same mindset and to do collaborative thinking. Do you buy that? Yeah. So far? I don't need to shut it down. 2 down? Okay. So, I don't want to sugarcoat this, though, and just say, you know, all music is the same, we're all equal, all different types of musicians play the same way and have the same mental sets, because we don't. I dug up a study in Austria where they followed people who play classical music, jazz, and folk. And they gave them a creative divergent thinking task. Does anybody know what that is? A divergent thinking task, what they might be asking them to do? Divergent, different. They asked them, yeah, a divergent thinking task is one where they're asking you to come up with a number of solutions, not just one solution. So, don't look at that, look at me. Who do you think did best? Don't look at that, I hope you didn't read it yet. Who do you think did best? So you got jazz, you've got folk, which is more kind of like what I am, and you had classical. Who do you think did best on it? Jazz. Very good, very good. Okay, yes, yes, good. All right, so everybody had the same motivation to learn. Everybody had the same perfectionistic, you know, tendencies, believe it or not. Classical musicians were the least open to new experiences. I heard somebody laugh, which I thought was interesting, but they're the least open. Folk musicians, which I guess I would put myself in that category, practice the least and output the most. So we're the ones that make the most CDs of everybody, and we don't practice as much. And jazz musicians are the most creative. And why? Because they improvise, right? Right, okay. Okay, so we're not all musicians are created equally. However, even so, if you're a musician, you've got some things working in your favor. And I'm going to talk about this a lot, but one thing, if you're a musician, you really have to learn to listen well. And I'll tell you why more, but you really have to. You can't get away with tuning out. It's not going to happen. And even though jazz musicians improvise the most, all of us have to improvise to some extent on stage. Even if you play in a symphony and you're not open to new ideas, if you make a boo-boo on stage, are you just going to drop the bow and go, oh man? You have to improvise, right? And cover it up. So we all improvise to some extent. And also, for those of you who play instruments, and those of you who don't, this may be interesting to you, it takes a long time to learn how to play an instrument. I mean, you have to practice and practice. If you're just going to play one little interesting riff on the guitar, it could take you like a week to get that down. So we're used to failing. We're used to failing and trying over and over again. And then again, musicians are just good at collaborating. Why do you think that is? Why are musicians good at collaborating? Why do we have to be? You play in a band, or you play in a symphony. You play with other people, so you have to, you have to learn how to play well with others, literally. So, Why am I talking to you? Oh, I think that sun thing is happening. I think the sun is happening. Okay. Why am I talking to you about this? I mean, I have a PhD, you know, in psychology from Princeton, and, you know, I used to be a professor at UCSC, and I got voted most inspirational professor. Well, okay, and then, as Martin told you, I went on to become a singer-songwriter. I have a few CDs out. I've had some songs on the radio. I had a #1 hit on U.S. college radio. I think that's what you were thinking of a few years ago. And then I've been doing creativity speaking, and I'm also a consultant for internet companies, and I moved to Atlanta. You guys know about that. I miss you guys so much. I want to move back. Don't tell anybody there, though. And so I'm consulting for AT&T there. But so, how many of you have master's degrees or PhDs? Anybody out there? Okay, I don't know what your experience was like, but when I was studying for exams at Princeton, I rarely studied with other people. I don't know if you had groups that you studied together, but usually I studied by myself. You know? And when I was a professor and I wrote papers, most of the time I wrote papers by myself. So I didn't know too much about team building until I became a singer-songwriter. You can't do that by yourself. I mean, I could come into a room with a guitar and sing, but that's not going to make an album happen, and that's not going to put an album out into the world, right? So I started to have to learn how to be in a team. And what I was going to do is tell you a success story and a failure story of mine, when it worked and when it didn't. So the first CD I ever put out that Martin was talking about in South Africa, I had a top 10 hit there. I had 11 songs on the radio, which is pretty cool. But it wasn't just like I just wrote some songs and then that happened. A lot of stuff happens in between. So first of all, I had to find a studio to record in. Then you need to have an engineer who's doing the recording. You usually have a producer who's sort of orchestrating the whole thing. You have studio musicians come in, because I don't play I don't play the drums. I don't play different instruments. So you have different musicians come in to record with you. And then you go out on the road, you usually get a manager. Can you see how this is a virtual team, but it's building, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you get a record label if you're lucky, which I did. And then you have a marketing group that goes out to the world and presents who you are. And then you try to find distribution. At that time it was still physical stores, so my CDs would be in stores in South Africa. And then you get a touring band, which is often not the same as the people that you recorded with, and then you go out there. And do you see all the moving pieces there? It's for a girl who was used to studying all by herself and getting A's on tests, this was a whole new thing, because I could do my best, but it didn't necessarily work out well unless my team was on the same page as I was. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so in the former case, well, I'll talk about the second one in a minute, it was pop music, we all agreed on that. I was a professor who came from the United States and went to South Africa and was playing music there. And everybody agreed on that vision. And it worked. Years later, when I had my fourth release, it did not work. It did not work. And I think it's the better CD of the two, because my team didn't work. So in that case, I had the same producer as I did the first time, but the recording artists I used didn't all agree with the vision of the CD. So there was a lot of little fighting. Can you guys relate to this? How many of you have ever been in a team? How many of you have ever had to make a joint decision? How many of you have ever felt like slapping somebody when they don't agree with you? Right? Right. Okay. This is what started happening. You're kind of looking at them going, that's a great idea. Right? So we didn't agree. The radio promoters didn't agree on the way to categorize my sound, so they put me out in a way that didn't match the way I looked at myself. And I won't go into all the details, but I will tell you, I'll just tell you a little story about what happened with my touring band, and we didn't agree on the vision either. And that CD disappeared fast, although it did sell later well online. But this band right here, this is the last time I ever played with that band. And I have a picture of it, and we look good. But this, do you want to hear the dirt? This is, you know, why was this the last time? Huh, I know. Why was this the last time? because we didn't agree on what we were doing. So there was, I know, there was, we were playing at a couple of festivals, and the one before, after we played, one of the people in the band, I won't say who, thank you for reminding me to be a little bit careful about that, said to me, "We all think you talk too much. You talk too much." Shut up. "You talk too much on stage. We don't think you should do it. You're losing people." Now, I'm the singing psychologist, right? And for me, my music has messages in it of overcoming obstacles and following your heart. And I like to set the songs up and talk about it and maybe give a story or two. That's my shtick, right? You guys know that, right? Well, they thought that was a bad idea. So at this festival, I said, all right, we'll try it your way. So we just got up there and I played. I didn't talk. I mean, I said, "Hello, how are you? Are you having a good time?" "Yeah," you know. And at the end, "Thank you very much," and that was it. And afterwards, the guy who sold CDs for us, he comes up to me, he goes, "What happened? What happened? What happened?" And I said, "Well, what's wrong?" He goes, "Why didn't you say anything? You didn't talk like you normally did. I really missed it." And I said, "Oh, yeah, well, it was just an experiment to see, you know, how it went over." And I said, "How were the CD sales?" And he goes, "You only sold half as many." So the vision I had was right for who I was. And I think the vision that these guys had was right for who they are. They like to play in bars. They do, you know, they did a lot of cover tunes, other people's songs. We were not on the same page. So it didn't make sense for us to stay together anymore. Does that make sense? Okay. Nobody's a bad guy or a good guy, just it wasn't a match made in heaven. So that's when I started thinking, I think I do understand what makes a good team and what doesn't, and that's why I'm going to go into it now. I came up with 10 keys, and look, they spell creativity. Isn't that cool? It took me a long time to get that going. Camaraderie, responsibility, empowerment, adversity, talent, integration, viewpoints, inspiration, tune in, and the yes and philosophy of improv. So I'm proud of myself for that. First one, camaraderie. I think the best way for this one to really sink in, because you guys might think, oh, that's oversimplified. I want you to think about the last time you were in a group setting and you were trying to arrive at some kind of agreement on something and you just couldn't and you wanted to slap somebody. Can you guys think about that? And you probably were thinking, I wish everybody just was thinking the way I do. Has anybody ever had that experience? Wish you were just thinking the way I do. If you all thought the way I did, we would just get through this, we'd agree, and we'd move on. Okay, well, here's why that's not always a great idea. And the analogy here is, if you're doing music, if you're always playing a C, that's boring. C, 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 C. If you're the cellist and you want it to all be about you, and you're playing a C, is that good music? It's not good music. You need all the different instruments to blend together to make good music. And here's the thing, you have to remember next time you're looking at somebody and you might want to them, everybody on a team has a unique and important role to play. And in this example, it might be a violin, a cello, bass, what have you. And what happens is, if you can honor the fact that everybody's different and allow what happens when they come together to just emerge, you're going to get wonderful, wonderful music. How many of you have just ever listened to a piece of music and it was so beautiful you almost wanted to cry? I can tell you that that did not happen because somebody was going, It happened because a lot of people who came from different backgrounds and playing different instruments just let something greater come. You guys have all heard of the saying, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So that's what happens if you can just sit tight long enough and let somebody else say something that maybe you don't agree with right away. Responsibility. I am now living in Atlanta, and I just had a show a couple of weeks ago, my first show there. It was interesting because my friends there just sort of assumed, it was on a Friday night, they just sort of assumed I would come with my guitar and play that Friday and I'd be ready. No, if you're gonna do a show or play in a symphony, You have to practice, man. Practice, 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 practice. You have to learn the song. You have to, when, for example, I play guitar, I have to change the strings on my guitar before I come in, or it's not going to sound as good. I have to tune the guitar. I have to make sure that the little, you know, where the, I can't even remember what it's called. I'm jet lagged a little bit. That when you, where you put the thank you, the jack into the, you have to make sure that that's working. And if you're recording a song in a studio and not everybody's learned their parts, or they don't bring their instruments in good shape, what's going to happen? You're not going to move very fast. And guess what? They charge by the hour. And if you come to a show and somebody forgot their capo, you know, that's something that you put on the fret to what are you going to do? It messes everything up. So just like being on a team in the real world, you know, sometimes you might think all you have to do is just sit down, plop down in a chair and arrive. But a lot of times you can take initiative, you know, maybe you need to research something. If you're trying to make a decision between a couple of things, maybe you can take it upon yourself to research it out, or just think about how you can add to others' decision-making process, and you'll do so much better than if you just sort of come passively. Empowerment. I think it's really important that teams empower their leaders, but also that leaders empower their teams. And I've been in the corporate world long enough to tell you that this doesn't always happen. I've certainly seen it not happen. But I have two examples here. I don't know if you can see these very well, but I have one example of a conductor leading a symphony. In that case, that's a team that's pretty much worked out their vision, right? How many of you have ever gone to hear a symphony? All right, and everybody's pretty much, you can tell they're pretty much on the same page, right? You don't have a fiddle player suddenly go, improv solo, right? That doesn't happen. So in that case, everybody's sort of agreeing on the vision and just they're following the leader. But there's other teams that haven't quite got the vision together yet, right? And I thought a good example of that is somebody improving. I don't know if you can see that picture, but there's somebody there improving a solo. So we can say, for just purposes of argument, that that is the leader of the team. So what are the people in the background doing? Have you ever thought about what the people in the background are doing while that person is figuring out a solo on the spot? Do you think they're like coming up with wild and crazy and interesting and inspiring ideas? They're playing the same chords over and over again. You want to poke your eye out with the stick after a while. It's kind of boring for you, but for that person who's coming up with solo, it's exactly what they need. Does that make sense? So just knowing when to empower the leader and how to empower the leader. I can tell you, being in a rock band, when we're trying to figure out our parts, when it comes time for the lead, usually the lead guitarist, to come up with a solo, that's exactly what we do. We just play the same thing over and over again while that person makes mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake until they get it. So can you see how that could help a leader in a team? Just be there, figure it out together, don't judge too soon. Okay. Adversity, this is one of my favorite stories. You know, teams often fall apart when something bad happens. Have you ever noticed that? Families, whatever, sports teams, something bad, and why? Because somebody's going, it's your fault, you did it. But oftentimes when something bad happens, it can bring out the best in you if you work with it. And so one of my favorite examples is, I don't know if you can see these guys, but there's this band from Scotland called Wolfstone. They're in kilts. Can you see? You can't see. Oh, that's too bad. They're like in little kilts and they're playing this rock guitar. They're crazy, right? I love this band. And I went to see them in Ben Lomond a few years ago. And what happened was they arrived, but their instruments did not. So everybody had a drink or two, and we're waiting, and the instruments did not come. And so they did happen to have a couple of acoustic guitars lying around, so what did they do? We all went into the back in the garden area, and they jammed music on the acoustic guitars. And then the instruments came in, and they did another set, electric. Can I tell you that that was one of the best nights of my life? And what did they do as a team? They didn't go, you didn't give the driver the right directions, damn you. They didn't do that. They just went, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do with this moment to make it work as a team? And it was so fast. It was instantaneous. We couldn't even tell that there was a problem, because I think there wasn't. They just worked with it. Okay. Talent. I don't know if you can see this, but I got a picture of Eric Clapton, and you all know who Eric Clapton is, right? Didn't they used to call him like guitar? You come from Clapton country. What did they call him? Guitar god? God of guitars or something? Okay, did you know he was not always great on the guitar? He had to practice his butt off to get great on the guitar. And Paul McCartney, that's the picture I have in the middle, he played piano. Did you know that he taught himself how to play piano? And they were in bands when this was happening. Did the rest of the band members go, come on, hurry up, man, just get it. They waited as they developed their talent. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever been in a team situation where you have a young'un. Can you tell I just came from the South? A young'un. Oh no, I'm gonna get a draw coming pretty soon. A young'un in your team, and you're thinking, oh, that person doesn't know anything. Intern, oh boy, they're gonna just not have any great ideas. Can I tell you something? Because I've led a lot of brainstorming sessions over the years. They often come up with the best ideas. So you don't want to judge people too soon. You also want to allow talent to develop. And there's one other thing I want to tell you that might help you next time you're sitting across from somebody and you want to smack them. The best teams, the ones that come up with the most creative ideas, are different from each other. They're made up of people who have different backgrounds. Something magical happens if you can learn to respect each other, even though you're coming from different backgrounds. Something magical happens. Do you believe me? Would you like an example? Yeah. That would be good, because I'm going to give you one. So again, I'm sorry you can't see these slides, but how many of you have ever heard of Alison Krauss? This is a picture of Alison Krauss and Robert Plant, Led Zeppelin, but not Alison Krauss? Okay, so what I'm going to do, Alison Krauss is a bluegrass fiddle player, and a damn good one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a clip of her playing. You ready for Robert Plant? Here's something completely different. How similar are those two types of music? Not very, right? And I don't know if you, I know you didn't show it on the camera, but were you able to see what they were wearing? Yeah, could you? You couldn't? Very, very bluegrassy outfits, what can I tell you? And a fiddle, acoustic guitar, stand-up bass with Alison Krauss, right? And then Robert Plant, right? Shirtless, long hair, blue jeans, you know, electric guitar, badass drums, right? So what was interesting, the reason why I'm showing you this is because for some reason, these two decided to work with each other. What? Does anybody know what that music sounds like? Can't imagine, right? Okay, they ended up putting out an album called Raising Sand and won several Grammy Awards. Now, whether you like this music or not is not so important. What is important is just notice what happened when they came together. First of all, who would have thought that their voices would sound so good together? But they do. Two totally different backgrounds merging like that. That music didn't sound anything like either of their music, but when they came together, they created something completely new. It's called synergy. It's synergy. So what I'm trying to get you, for those of you who are still working on teams, any kind, even in a family, if you are willing to let people be different and come together and express their new ideas and sort of stand away and let it happen, something really cool can come out of it, especially new creative ideas. So that's in lieu of me playing guitar today. Well, sorry. Okay, here's another thing. Integration. I love this quote. I don't know if you can see it. Music is the space between notes. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, if you actually look at music written, you write the spaces in, right? You write the spaces in. And I can tell you when you're a musician and you're first starting out, you think you're supposed to play all the time, right? You're supposed to just fill up all the space with some kind of lick or something. But the truth is, and music's going to sound a lot better if you ease it up a little bit and have a lot of spaces in it. Does that make sense? It's the same thing for having a, you know, even if it's a family discussion about something or something that somebody did, or a team building exercise in the corporate world, or even you guys here when you're trying to decide where you're going to move next or if you're going to move, I can tell you a really good idea is not to have marathon meetings. Don't have marathon meetings. Break them up. Let people walk away and think about it and come back, because you need time to integrate. And it really makes a difference, because coming from the corporate world, I can tell you that sometimes those meetings go on for 2 or 3 hours. And you know what? I think when you are in a meeting for 3 hours, are you hearing anything anymore? No. And if you're pissed off at somebody, is that anger easing off? No. It's only building. So take a walk around the block. Integrate. Viewpoints. Again, it's sort of the same idea, but if you're trying to come up with a new idea, like if I'm trying to write a new song and I pick up the guitar, I'm only going to come up with so many ideas. And I think you often hear when a band is recording a new CD, I'm sure you've probably heard this, U2 is recording a new CD. Often what they'll do is and plus they have a lot of money, they'll come into the studio and they'll just start throwing musical ideas at each other. And the reason why that's good, and it helps me too, if I have somebody else who's playing guitar, well, why do you think that would be good? Why is that better than just having one person try to come up with all the ideas? Why? Anybody got any idea?
Because your own background, because your own set ideas.
Yes.
Variety.
Variety. Well, if I'm, you know, I tend to write the same kind of songs over and over again until I get out of that phase, right? So maybe I always play the same chord progression and the same kind of rhythm. But if I have a guitarist over there come up with ideas, he may play or she may play completely different rhythm and completely different notes. So what does that make me do as a singer? I come up with something I wouldn't have on my own. Does that make sense? So sometimes when you want to come up with your best ideas, the best thing to do is to throw ideas back and forth and not be scared of it. And not be scared if somebody comes up with something that you didn't, that sounds foreign. That's how you come, and what I would recommend, if you are in the corporate world or if you humanists too, is, you know what's a good idea to do every once in a while, besides having your regular meetings, your just normal meetings where you're figuring things out, is to have brainstorming sessions. Has anybody in here ever been in a brainstorming session? They can be weird and wild, and they can also come up with some great ideas. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Inspiration, here's another thing. If you find yourself coming to the same situation over again and you're not feeling inspired by it anymore, maybe you don't want to be on that team anymore. And that's okay. That's okay. You have different ways you can have teams. Like I have you two over there on the left. They keep reinventing themselves and they stay inspired. I have Fleetwood Mac. Have you guys heard of Fleetwood Mac? They pretty much have the same sound over and over again now that it's this particular lineup. And they agree with that and they're inspired by that, so they stay together. But if you're not inspired, it may be time to switch teams and try something new. Tune in. Okay, this is where, remember I was telling you about listening? You guys cannot listen to me right now, and there's going to be no consequence of it whatsoever, except for I'll come over and slap you in the face. No, I'm just kidding. But there's no consequence, right? But if you are in a musical production, like an opera, I don't know if you can see that, and you know in opera they have call and response. So in this example, this woman is singing. She's singing something to him, and what is he supposed to do in a second? Thank you. Sing back, right? Call and response. If he's not listening to her, is he going to know when to do that? So this is one of the reasons why musicians have really good listening skills. And also, I have a choir over there. Has anybody sung in a choir before? Yeah, okay. Oh, many more people than admitted they were musicians. That's interesting. So have you noticed that when you sing, if you're trying to harmonize with somebody else, you've kind of got to listen to both of you at the same time to make sure it's working? You have to listen. So actually, there's this phrase called naive listening. If you've been coming to a meeting over and over again and you kind of know the people all the time, and say there's a woman and she always wears, I don't know, a blue jacket and pearl earrings and red shoes, and maybe she always says the same thing every meeting, and so you're thinking, yeah, oh, there she goes again, and you tune her out. How many of you have ever done that before? You just know what they're going to say and you tune them out. Here's the thing, they may actually do something different someday. You start to pigeonhole them and you can't hear what they're really saying. So they call it naive listening. Try to listen as if you don't know who that person is. And my favorite one of all, because all the things I've talked about so far is what any musician needs to do to be a good musician. But it also builds the foundation for being a jazz musician or an improviser. And how many of you know who Miles Davis is? Okay. Miles Davis said, "There are no mistakes." Has anybody ever heard that quote before? There are no mistakes. I saw a bunch of interviews with musicians who have played with Miles Davis over the years. And they said that this is what happens. You're up on stage, and all of a sudden, somebody on the stage plays a hugely sour note. It stands out like a sore thumb. And what do? Do they all stop and go, what the heck was that? Jesus, I'm so tired of working with you. No, what they do is they all go towards that note. They all go towards that note, and because they go towards that note, they are improvising, and that is what jazz improvising is. It's improvising. It's the yes and philosophy of improv. Have you guys ever heard of the yes and philosophy of improv in general? You guys know what improv is, right? Oh, okay. You know who Tina Fey is? Okay. She has a good example. I think it's, this is an example of yes and think about this for the next time you're in a meeting with somebody that you don't necessarily want to say yes to. Stick a buck. Okay. A no would be, why? It's just your finger. A yes would be, isn't that the gun I gave you last Christmas? Do you see the difference? So in improv, you accept what the person offers, even if it's weird. Now, you may not want to do that, but it builds an extremely wonderful experience. And here's the thing. You allow wrong ideas to happen in improv, and sometimes those wrong ideas, those mistakes, end up being winning products, like Post-it notes. How many of you know the history of Post-it notes? How many of you don't know the history? Would you like to know the history of Post-it notes? Spencer Silver was working at 3M Research. He was trying to make a really hard glue, a strong glue, and he failed. His glue was weak. And I actually gave this a talk about Post-it notes and some other things to a group that somebody from 3M Research was there. And when I said that they turned him away, the guy said to me afterwards sheepishly, yeah, we really did. We turned him down. We thought the idea was bad. So 4 years later, a friend of his who also worked at 3M was singing in a choir, and he noticed that his hymnal note kept falling out right? And he suddenly thought about his friend's weak glue and realized, oh my God, this would really work so great in this situation. And they started working together, and it wasn't an instant success. It was a few years later they finally test marketed it and got it out, and it's one of the most popular products to do. But that was a weird idea. It was a failure at first. So it's that tolerance of failure. And so the last thing I wanted to show you is brainstorming rules. For those of you who haven't ever done brainstorming, these are good brainstorming rules, but I wanted to tell you the story about Pringles. How many of you know the story about Pringles? Does anybody know? Does everybody know what Pringles is? Does everybody eat Pringles? Yeah. No. So Pringles Pringles was a crazy idea in a brainstorming session, but not really. Let me tell you what happened. There were a bunch of executives getting together trying to figure out how they were going to package their potato chips. And one guy started talking about raking leaves all the time. Now, this might be the case where you want to go, shut up, God, why is he talking about raking leaves in this meeting? But so in good brainstorming, good improving, you allow ideas like that to emerge, and then you don't say no, that's just a finger, you say yes and da-da-da. So what happened is he started going home, and they had a few of these meetings. He went home and he raked a bunch of leaves and he put them in a bag, and then he goes, I want to get more of these leaves in a bag. How can I do that? So the next time they get together and he says, oh, I know, wet the leaves, wet the leaves. And everybody's like, wet the leaves? Wet the leaves, wet the leaves, yes and. Then he goes home and he wets the leaves and he puts them in a bag and he gets more in the bag, but then he comes back and he goes, oh, but they crumbled, man, they just all crumbled. That didn't work. And then slowly but surely, because they allowed him to have these kinds of ideas, they started thinking about, wait a minute, what if we, Pringles is not 100% potato chip, did you know that? I'm not giving away a secret here. It's only about 50% potato chip, and it's got other ingredients in it. And they started thinking, wait, if we made a mold of the leaves, we could get more in a bag. If we make a mold of the potato chips, we can get more in a bag. Does that make sense? So by allowing him to have a weird idea like that, it ended up becoming Pringles.